Okay, welcome back. It's time for part two, Cannabis Conversations with Allison and Riley. Look, if you missed the first part, I say it all the time. Pause here. This won't make any sense, I promise. Pause here, go back, watch part one. The origin stories here are absolutely amazing. You need to hear them both. They're incredible. So as we get into part two, what we want to be talking about is the science of smokability. Before we get into it, as always, thank you, Fat Nugs Magazine, for the sponsorship. They support small mom and pop, equity, legacy, veteran-owned, and women-run businesses. I'm telling you, they actually care about the industry itself. They are the opposite of big business in this industry. They are independently owned and operated, which is not easy if you think about printing magazines in 2025. So go out and support the people that matter to us. Fat Nugs Magazines matters, and we thank them. Okay, Allison, you want to talk about the science of smokability. I've been interested to hear more about this since Allison she gave us a little bit about it on season 2. You know, she dropped that we're getting near the end. We're getting, towards the next steps. Can you just give us a quick, brief science of smokability overview before we get into the details of it?
Yeah, well, I guess if you don't mind, I'll back it up a little more and kind of tell you the origin story of how that came about.
Love it.
Um, you know, I was doing some work really looking at post-harvest, trying to understand, what is it that's in my capacity that are doing all these things that the industry's so crazy about. So the color of the ash, right? How it, just that physical part of color of ash seemed to be so important. And, I had no preference in it. I've had my experiences with it being one way or the other, but all my mind really wants to do is prove why and what is happening. And then once we know that, we can back up and start to improve the quality. And so, you know, to start to understand that, jump into the literature, and literature being tobacco, because that's really all we have to pull from as far as ash color goes. Unless you start to go down the path of, well, when forests burn, what color? There's lots of combustion research we could look at, but at least that's the most practical for us, jumping in the tobacco research. And as I'm reading, I'm seeing all sorts of things all over the place of, not only how different agronomic practices can affect the color of an ash, but how these different agronomic processes can change the quality of the cigarette itself. And so that was just so crazy to me because I didn't really know that much about cigarettes before doing an extremely deep dive, and now I feel like I know way more than I should about it. But as I was reading, I understood. It was very clear. This is well past just the agronomic part. How to grow and cultivate the plant. And so I reached out at the time to Miyabi, who I knew Miyabi before Riley, and talked with them to say, well, let's put our brains together. Let's make this a much bigger project than just, if I dry and cure this way, this is what's going to happen. Let's look at this full delivery of, you know, we're growing it this way, intentionally doing some things, same thing in drying and curing. And then, once it's even in the pre-roll or the joint, what is being delivered through that smoke. And so that's when we decided to do this as a large team with expertise being in different areas where we can really look at this whole timeline of start to finish and start to put some qualitative and quantitative data points around smoking and why smoking. Um, we've been asked this probably a million times, why do you want to study smoke? Smoking's bad, why even go down that path? And, like you guys, I'm also a daily user. At nighttime, it's just kind of a requirement for me, to turn my brain off. Um, and so I have the desire to, I know that there are therapeutical benefits from it. And what can we do as scientists, as growers, to make a process to improve it, not only the quality portion, but the safety portion. And so if we can find things to make it safer and better, that's what we want to do. And so that's why we came together. Um, Riley, you want to jump in and talk about phase one and kind of where we've got thus far?
Yeah, I'll give a little intro to phase one. So this is a series of experiments. It's not like you can just like do something and be like, all right, we figured out what quality cannabis is, like check, like publish. So it's a series of experiments. And the first phase is moisture content or water activity so that we can see if different levels of water are present in the flower. Does that affect the consumer experience on smokability? And does it affect the chemistry that's produced through the smoking experience too? So with every phase of science of smokability, there's every phase that we think we can, there's going to be two different portions of it. So one is going to involve the smoking machine. And this is really the chemistry aspect, the very objective aspect of it that we're looking at, like chemical compounds, ratios of compounds, toxicants, all that kind of stuff. So we literally put joints into the smoking machine. We smoke them in the machine. We collect that smoke condensate, and then we analyze it in a laboratory. So that's one part of it. But for phase one, we also really wanted to include consumer experience because it's safe to analyze at this point. We analyzed 3 different water activities: 0.45, 0.65, and 0.85. We did not send out the 0.85 to consumers because it could very potentially produce mold at that level. Below 0.65 is like, or at 0.65 is like the safety level of what microbes won't grow at. So for the 0.45 and the 0.65, we decided to send out hemp joints to anybody who wanted to participate. We had a cap, but people were very, 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 very interested in participating in this research. So we opened it up to consumers, blinded. So it was just like, joint 1 and joint 2. They would open it up. We recorded a whole protocol. Like there's an actual video out there of Dr. Shields and I smoking a joint and saying, okay, answer question number 1 at this point. Okay, light your joint. What's the lightability like? Go through the whole process. So again, playing on that trust thing too. It's not just random researchers from a university asking you about your experience. We're smoking the joints too, and we're also participating in this. So there's kind of that more personalized aspect too. So then people would smoke the joint and then fill out a series of survey questions. And those questions were developed between us, all of us being daily consumers, as well as in collaboration with the ganjiers, who are these group of people who are certified experts in analyzing cannabis, specifically smoking cannabis. They're out of California, and it's like a whole trained program based on a 100-point scale. We had developed a survey, and then we really wanted to run it by them and say, hey, is there anything we're missing? Is there anything we want to include here that might be important in the smoking process? Because of course, when you're smoking a joint in a machine, like you're not going to be able to get data on like harshness or, how strong that flavor is coming through, the light of it. Like, we're just missing a lot of data. So it really is important to get that consumer data as well. And then that's kind of both portions of the project. And then, it took a while to collect all that data, to analyze all that data. And then the peer-reviewed publication is going to have both the data from the consumers, the survey data, as well as the data from the chemistry.
And so with that part of it, so you look at you talk about phase 1, part 1, the smoking machine. And you guys talked about hurdles at kind of the end of part 1 that we discussed, some of the issues that come up with that. I always kind of thought that the South would naturally pivot to cannabis. It just made sense to me. As soon as people started to turn their back on $10 pack cigarettes, people would be like, yeah, all right, well, then I'm going to, and now when you run across people smoking a cigarette, it's just still weird to me. I don't know. It's that foreign. But in the South with the smoking machines, how did we arrive at that, like as part of the research? Was that just you guys saying, hey, how can we get the information? How does the smoking machine make its way into this discussion?
I think it kind of had to. I mean, I had run previous research before. I worked in a lab that studied cannabis chemistry in the smoke, but also I've done projects with like raw rolling papers, analyzing the different components of different size joints, different diameter joints. And you can't replicate that process in any other way other than smoking the joint and collecting that condensate. And there's many different ways to do it. Like I've rigged up machines before from just like stuff in the lab, but you are missing some valuable data when you are kind of just DIYing it. There's something called pressure drop, which is essentially like when you're pulling through like the strength of that pole and that kind of information that you get a lot easier through the smoking machine. It's a lot more consistent versus something that you can kind of just produce in a laboratory. So I think based on the expertise of our team, many of us, Dr. Marcus Rogan, who's published a lot on smoke chemistry as well, we're kind of the only people who have researched it and published it in the past. So I think it was really important for us to use that expertise in this project because it's so fundamental for us actually understanding. And then, we're doing phase 1 of this now, but for phase 2, for phase 3, for phase 4, we want consistent measurements. We want consistent methodology, and having a machine like this combustion machine that we're using allows for repeatable measurements rather than just kind of like rigging something up whenever the time comes and just doing your best.
Because that's how you keep the data as clean as possible, right? I mean, if you continue
Correct.
to use the same input output and you just continually measure that, again, in my other life, the way we do our job, we do it the same way every single month, every single time, because we're watching the same data points. If they move, we'll know. And if they don't, then everything's cool. And so, you have to have that. And I think a lot of people forget that. And when you're trying to get consumer data, I mean, I think about the both of you collecting this data and getting these surveys and seeing what's going on, giving a video about step 1, step 2. How well did the consumer do in getting the data back? Like, was it as usable as you thought? Was there more than you thought, less than you thought? Like, give me some feedback on what you saw on the consumer side of it.
I thought it was fantastic. I don't know about you, Allison, but like compared to other surveys done in the past, compared to other like quality of data, people were engaged. People were stoked. Like we were like, okay, we're shipping them out. And we sent an email and like literally, the next day people are like, where is it? I haven't got it yet. Like I need this.
People are excited.
Yes,
they were excited.
Stoked.
And when they're excited, it makes it even better for us.
Exactly.
Instead of emailing, can you get this turned in? Begging.
You have 2 more days.
Yep.
Yeah, the passion makes it easy, right? When you find and collect people's passion, they can get into that. They can easily see a route forward. And again, with the reach of your brands and your individual on social media, it's not hard to find that net, right? To say, here's what I'm thinking about doing, hit up the DM or hit this link, whatever the case is. I'm sure you had more consumers than you could probably handle. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it filled up very fast. And it wasn't even that long ago. I still got a message about it because like these videos last forever on social media. When people come across them, they're like, hey, by the way, and I'm like, oh, that's been closed for a long time. But part of that too is like kind of what you said in the beginning of this is a lot of people think of stoners as like these lazy people that aren't like, functioning members of society. We treat stoners as experts in this industry, as experts on cannabis consumption. And I think people want their opinion to be respected like that and have a platform to be able to provide their opinion. And I also just wanted to say one other thing about the smoke machine and like the power of a smoke machine is something else you can control on that machine is essentially your puff topography or like the way that it's puffing. So through our initial experiments, Dr. Justice and I were the ones running the experiments, and we're watching this machine puff and we're like, that's not how we smoke weed. That's not how anyone smokes weed.
Yeah.
So because it was designed from cigarette smokers. It was, this quick puffs and like you're ripping through a dart, and that's just not how stoners are smoking. So after we ran the first experiment, something that we were really passionate about was to develop a better smoking profile for cannabis consumers. So not just us to use in future experiments, but if anyone else wants to run smoking experiments for cannabis, they can use this methodology. So that's something that we did at MJ Biz. We've done at these other events is we've been literally hooking up joints to this little machine that tracks how strong someone's puffing, the duration between puffs, how long someone's puffing. So we can develop a much better profile to program this machine to be as accurate as possible for cannabis consumers, because it really does affect the chemistry too. If you think of like a long rip off of a joint, you're really building that ember, and it's going to get hotter, and it's going to change the chemistry. More transformations are going to happen versus these little like micro puffs. So that was another thing that we learned from the first phase of Science of Smokability, and we're really excited to implement that into phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4 down the line.
I mean, again, for a lifetime stoner, Riley, it's got to be like just like some days you must feel like Willy Wonka, because it's really crazy to think about looking at this machine and you both just going, nope, that ain't, I mean, yeah, it's here, it's going to work, but nope, that data is not going to be valuable to us because that's not the process. That's not the input that we're going to be looking at. That's important to us. That's not what the consumer is going to do. And I love the fact that we're repurposing old tobacco machines for cannabis. Like I don't know if it's the guy in me that just doesn't like to get rid of anything and likes to keep everything forever, but that really makes me happy to see on that front. Allison, when it comes to the research part of it, the smokability part of it, if you look at either the smoke machine or the consumer experience, where do you tend to throw your attention? I know it's easy to say both, but like from your perspective, from your background, which way do you kind of start to tear more into the data?
I suppose it's more on the hard data side, looking at correlations of what we did to the plants to make causation of this or of that.
So even before those steps, you're more interested in the actual processing part of it. When you look at the data, before you even get to a smoke machine, before you even get to a consumer, your passion lies in that first half. Is that what we're saying?
It does. It lies up to right before you throw it in a joint. Not that I'm not interested in the rest of that for sure. But I would say my training, my focus, that is my meat and potatoes.
Because that is the large part of the science of smokability, right, Riley? I mean, if you look at your data through a smoke machine, if you don't know how it was processed and you don't know the input, then it doesn't really do you a lot of good, or lack of consistency to come back to the back half. So what you're all doing here is taking all of your your mad scientists that you all are, and you're putting it all together into this really cool, consumable content piece. And that's what I've really enjoyed about reading about, seeing the pictures, seeing the phases come together. Riley, where do you stand on the funnel? Where does Riley's attention go if we go from, harvest all the way to the two-pronged consumer and smoke machine data? Where do you dive in deeper?
I'd say I love the smoke machine data, but I really love the consumer data too, because as a consumer, you can feel the difference between quality cannabis and like these small nuances. And it's actually cool to see some of that really come out in the data. And I almost think that the consumer data is a little more interesting than the chemistry data. Just from this first phase, we're seeing slight differences in ash color, harshness, these things that we're talking about that are really difficult to quantify normally, but like it is coming through from the consumer experience. And Allison and I were the first ones to actually smoke this, because the second we had our samples were ready, like, yes, okay, let's go. So we smoked them first, and we were like the first ones to actually take the survey. So it was I thought it was actually really, really interesting to see those little nuances come through in the data.
That's awesome.
I think we're at a portion in our industry where we have to have all of this, front to back, and having a lot of times in academic work, it's all broken up, and it's, this piece doesn't fit or necessarily translate to the other side. The plant growing doesn't always go with consumer, right? The scientists who are doing that consumer data, where did they really get their products, and is the flower homogeneous? But being able to put it all together where we really understand what's going on front to back of the experiment, I think so cool.
Yeah, frankly, Allison, that's really the only vertical integration that I'm interested in. I'll be honest with you, is in the scientific realm, because I've been doing my business a long time. And I think there's a lot of people who think they can do everything in my industry in one place, just make it easy on themselves to be vertically integrated. And 10 times out of 10, they all suck at it. And the reality is you're probably really good at three things as part of a vertical integration. But when you put a bunch of smart people together in a line that are working on a scientific project, that's where vertical integration makes sense to me. So wonderful work by all of you to do it. Again, you've been more than great with your time. As we sort of wrap things up, Allison, what are your final thoughts on the smokability, the science of smokability research, where it's at right now, and what is the next step, or as you see it, where you're hoping to go with that, and kind of give us a little highlight of the next part of it.
Yeah, so, I guess one thing we should mention is all of this work is made possible by the industry, right? Government grants are not supporting this. And so all of us scientists have put our heads together, got this equipment, come up with these experimentations, all through support of the industry. And it's been quite a few groups that have gone to donate money for us to make this happen. So we're entirely grateful to them. And it's just been wonderful. But we would love to do this as long as there's a desire from the industry and a need, which I think this research plant quality, all of this research, we're going to be long gone before we're even beginning to understand this plant, like to the extent we need it. So we will do that work as long as possible. But phase 2, at least what's on the docket, what's planned for next, is really looking at plant fertility and how it affects smoking quality, and potential toxicants that could come out of that. So, real quick, in tobacco, there's a lot of guidelines on what type of nutrients that you should not overfeed your plants, because that equates to potentially elevated toxicants, as well as a harsh smoke.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is intentionally feed the plants with elevated nutrients, of some similar research to what's there in tobacco, and see how that translates.
Got it. Well, let me tell you right now, that's the other thing I want to ask you guys before we get going too far away. Where can folks get involved, Allison? You mentioned that, it's the community that helps. It's the people in the industry. It's the people that donate. Where can people get involved if they want to start putting some money behind it or start participating in a way to help the cause?
Yeah, so you can check out both organizations' websites. Cresearch.org. I'm sorry, crcresearch.org is the Cannabis Research Coalition's. You can follow us on Instagram, all the social medias. My personal is Dr. Justice Grows, dr.justice_grows. And then Riley, you can let them know where to find you guys.
Yeah, our website that you can sign up for our email list to take part in Science of Smokability or any of the other research that we do. You could head to appliedpharmacognosy.org. If you have trouble spelling that, just go to my Instagram, Cannabichem. It's on the screen right now. Everything's linked in my bio. I also will always post on my story when we have a new project going, but I highly recommend the email list because everything fills up fast. Like, people love to participate in research. So definitely be the first to find out. And I just want to reiterate what Allison said about us being funded through the industry. We have these amazing sponsors, these amazing people who are involved in the project. And, specifically, I think MSOs get a lot of hate. And I just want to say that they are helping fund this project, which I do think speaks volumes about at least some of them, about their ability to invest in this quality issue that we have in the industry. And, not every company can invest. They don't have the means to do so. But some of the ones that do, we really appreciate them putting some of their funds towards this education and research, because our goal is to share this with everyone, not to just use it as private IP for us to just produce the perfect pre-roll. You know, we're not trying to do that. We're trying to share this with everyone so that everyone can have a more smokable, safer product. So it really is worth investing in for our industry as a whole. And as Allison said, like the NIH isn't funding smokability experiments for cannabis.
No.
So
that's probably not on the docket anytime soon either. So
good luck with that.
That we need each other to move forward. Riley, well said. Allison, thank you guys so much for joining me. This was exactly what I hoped it would be, and I think people are going to get a lot out of it. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing as a consumer first guy. It's something that's important. You know, I've actually gone on mute a few times because I was given a new pre-roll at an event, and I decided to hit it before we started. And I know that it isn't for me because it makes me cough. So now I get rid of it. But at the end of the day, I want to know why that is. I want to know more about the chemistry and what things I should be looking for given who I am. So thank you both so much for your work. Thank you to Fat Nugs Magazine for being our sponsor. We love you. If you don't know about Dustin and his team, go check them out. They're all over social media. Their brand partnerships are amazing. They do a lot for the businesses they do business with because it's all about small businesses, women-owned, veteran-owned. He supports the supporting people, man. Go out and support him. Ladies, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Remember, remove the stigma, uplift the plant to its rightful place in this world. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Cool. Thanks for having us on. Mad love.